Information Technology Leaders is sponsored by the Cobalt Group, an e-business company that develops software and services to help automotive manufacturers and dealers maximize their overall operating efficiencies and profits. This week on Information Technology Leaders, Rajan Krishnamurty, Chief Technology Officer at the Cobalt Group.
Today's guest is the Chief Technology Officer for the Cobalt Group, a leading provider of e-business products and services for the automotive industry. His career began at IBM in Texas, where he systematically climbed through the ranks of technical and business management before deciding to leave the traditional corporate world to serve as a mentor to this entrepreneurial effort. He will show us that success can come from gentle strength, that you can maintain the culture of your birthplace while embracing the opportunities and traditions of your new home, and that nice guys don't have to finish last. Please welcome Rajan Krishnamurty. Tell us about growing up in India. What was that like?
It was a pretty normal childhood, actually. I was born in the northeast of India. I don't remember a whole lot about it, actually, but I moved around a lot in India. I always grew up in speaking English, which is a pretty popular question, and lived in many, many different cities. My father worked for the central government, so he got moved a lot.
Do you think the fact that you moved a lot is why your family is as close as it is now, in terms of the personalities?
That's the factor. The family is close because of our family values, and not, I mean, just the way I was raised, I guess. And we're a pretty close, culturally close family.
Are you the only one in your family who would only wear warm clothes, or is that everybody in your family insisted on having things ironed before they put them on?
I think that's a rumor. No, I like my clothes well pressed, if you will, but it was just.
So it wasn't the warmth you were going for.
No, it wasn't warm.
It
was just neat. It just had to be neat. And, generally, I think I'm still neat, but things have changed.
Yeah, I hear it takes you a long time to get packed when you're packing to go on vacation.
Oh, that's another rumor.
There's another rumor.
I pack pretty. Well, I have to think about it and make sure I have the right stuff.
Of course.
Yeah. It does take me a while, but.
What were you like in high school?
I was your typical good boy. I mean, I just had a very pretty placid high school life. I was always expected to do well in study and so on, so I guess I focused on those things and probably missed out on a few exciting things in life at that point, but. I just studied hard and tried to have fun and do well.
Through the 1970s, it seems that your family started to move to the United States at the rate of about one person per year. Mm-hmm. Why did they come to this country, and why did they do that at that pace?
It was mainly for opportunity. My dad worked for 30 years in the Indian government, right? And he was a mathematician, and he thought his kids should have the right opportunities. And so after 30 years, he made the move first in 71, I think, if I remember correctly. So he came over, got a job with the intention of bringing us over. And so he came over, then when he could afford a ticket, my mom came over, and then my sister did, and then I did. So it was driven by opportunity, and he wanted to have, his kids have the right opportunity in life, I guess.
And then you were in college for 3 years before you came here. How did that come about?
I just came on summer vacation. So my parents were here for 3 years in Houston, and I came on vacation with one bag, and I just stayed. Actually, I watched, my first football game the day I arrived. It was a game between They used to have in 1975 the pro team play the college team. I think that was the last year they did it, and I watched that game and I really enjoyed it, and I guess I just stayed. I just didn't go back.
Because you kind of like the football game.
Yeah, I think so. That must be the reason.
How did university in India differ from university in the United States?
Probably more structured. I mean, you had, at least when I went to school, you had a certain set of classes you took. There wasn't a whole lot of choice. There was some. And the main difference was, I think, in some ways you had to think differently when you came here. So, you know, when you came and did a physics lab, I mean, you had the semester to do it. Whereas in India, you had to get it done typically, at least in my time, during the 3 hours. So I had to think more for myself, I think. Think more independently here. But the training itself was much better done over there. I mean, you know, more intense training.
Was there anything about the college experience that you wish you'd taken more advantage of?
There or here?
Both.
Over there, I think I missed out by not graduating there. You know, I left after 3 years. So I think, you know, the 2 years in undergraduate where I didn't finish, if you will, and I came over here. So I think I missed some of that camaraderie with the rest of my batchmates. And interestingly, I will be seeing them in January after 25 years. So they have accepted me. But I was pretty naive about the world, and so I think I wish I'd probably spent more time understanding the business environment so I could leverage it more.
Yeah. So you said that you didn't focus as much on the business world while you were at college. How did you get your first job after college?
Campus interview. IBM came to interview, and you know, I always wanted to work for IBM.
Why?
Why? They were always viewed very, regarded very highly in India, at least when I grew up. And I had one of my cousins used to work for IBM. And I always thought of them. You know, I love the think motto, which, you know, they don't use right now, but I just thought it was really a wonderful thing. I just wanted to work for IBM. So when they came to interview, I signed up and I interviewed, and I actually ended up, you know, those days the interview was not much about you. I mean, I interviewed the guys that interviewed me, it turned out. I mean, I asked them more questions than they asked me. But it was primarily driven by, you know, my grades and so on, you know, junior engineer.
Were there other companies that you were looking at, or you just knew that that's what you wanted?
I interviewed Texas Instruments in Houston, and they turned me down. And that was it. There was just 2 interviews.
Just the 2 of them?
Yeah.
And your first role at IBM was what?
It was in the office products division, a junior engineer doing hardware development. And I was basically developing circuits for keyboard interfaces to computers back in the old days.
And did you enjoy that?
You know, I switched to software after several years, so I actually enjoyed software a lot more. But I was just you know, delirious about getting a job and making $1,500 a month. I thought it was
pretty
just
cool.
Wonderful.
One of the things that you told me is that you said this was your first work experience and you didn't know enough to know that you weren't doing a lot. What did you mean by that?
Well, I think this relates back to, you know, I was pretty naive coming into the business world, so I just didn't know what I was supposed to look out for, you know, whether I was on a important project or not, whether we were making progress or not. Should I be looking for different roles? I mean, I just did the work I was given. I just wasn't smart enough to say, you know, maybe I should be looking around and seeing what's happening in the business. Maybe there's something better I could be doing. So I think there's a time for everything, and you know, I just had to learn it when I was ready for it.
Yeah. At this time, you also went and got a master's degree. What was your master's in?
In electrical engineering. Yeah.
Were you glad that you had a couple of years of work experience under your belt before you did that, or do you think it wouldn't have made any difference?
I think from a career standpoint, it would have been better if I'd finished my master's before I got a job.
Really?
It would have started me up, I think, a little better salary. But I think the value of working and studying, you know, I could probably match my interests a little more better, you know, as opposed to just an academic thing.
Yeah, because I'd found if I'd gone for my master's degree right after college, I wouldn't have had the depth of understanding about some of the complexities that you actually hit in the business world. It would have still all been academic.
Yeah, I do think it was better for me to do it, while I was working, because I needed that work experience.
What were some of your significant takeaways from the program?
From the master's?
From the master's program.
Got to work hard. I wasn't. I think it was just getting to a better level of analytical thinking. I picked some wrong courses that I thought they were. Four-year optics is the only course I got a C in, which I knew nothing about. And, I don't know why I picked that. It was just one of those things. But I think studying is good, and one always has to read and study, whether it's doing a master's or whether you're reading yourself. So I think it forces a certain discipline and a way to think.
Yeah.
And I think that's the main thing I got out of that.
And was it hard to kind of go to school while you were working full time?
Yeah, it was a pain in the butt, actually.
Yeah. That's what I did.
Because doing project work and getting a job done, I mean, there was times when, I had to be at school like 24, 36 hours, and coming back to work and doing that was difficult. So I paced myself. It took me like 4 years to finish, but it was still difficult.
Yeah. And then, as you said, you moved from the hardware side over to the software side, and you said you liked that better. What did you like better about it?
I think the whole software applications world, you're just working on more real business problems. In the hardware, you're kind of really removed from the customer and from the market. And while it's interesting technologically, it's not interesting to me, or at least I didn't find it interesting from a business perspective. So I think you get a lot more business exposure in the software world than you do in the hardware world.
You were awarded 3 patents. That sort of sounds like a big deal. Was that a big deal?
In the scheme of things, I think so.
Yeah.
I mean, you go through the process of, and the hardest work is actually simple work that, many people think patents are, these unique inventions, like the it thing, and it's really not, because it's everyday concepts that are valuable from a business perspective, and you can turn into a patent to, to protect a company's rights. So it's more about just focusing on what you've done. You continue to submit papers and so on, and, patents emerge. Yeah.
There's something about that sounds very academic. It sounds like an academic process where you're writing papers and submitting things. And did it have that academic feel? It
is academic, and it's very structured, and it's not necessarily fun, but I think it's very important for the business. I mean, IBM, one of the largest inventors as a company, and a lot of their business transactions, they get royalties to be traded because they have this big patent portfolio. So it's really a very crucial part of business.
After a short time working in the software area, you became a manager. What was your team responsible for?
I actually became manager in the diagnostics department in the operating system area. So we developed actually some of the early diagnostics technology using, artificial intelligence engines at that time. So that's what our department did.
Did you feel that you were ready for management?
Yes and no. I mean, IBM, where I learned a lot about management, they take you through a pretty rigorous preparation. You're selected only when they think you're ready, typically. But I was just thrown in there with guys that had been in the company 10, 15 years, were 2 levels my senior. Managing people is a difficult thing. So I was just thrown in there, and I just had to do it. And some things I did well, and some things I didn't.
What did you do well, and what didn't you do well?
I guess I work hard, so I was pretty good.
So now you're working hard. Now you know what hard work is.
Yes. Being honest and direct with people. But I didn't know how to deal with different types of people, So if there's somebody that's been there 15 years, thinking of you as a little punk, who are you to manage me, And you just don't know how to deal with that. And you just have to, you live and learn.
Yeah. I remember in my first management experience, I was working for a woman who was a good bit older than I was, and it just took me a long time to figure out how to manage her, how to manage the situation, and I realized that she liked lists. So if I could give her a list every day, she wanted to prove to me that she could do it. And every day she'd come back and tell me that she finished the list, and that was her way of having one-upsmanship, but it still got the job done. And
That's true. I mean, some people
yeah.
like daily contact. Some people like to be more organized and meet with you once a week.
right,
Some people like feedback, some don't. I mean, it's just you
Depends
have
on
to
the
understand what they want, and,
Right.
and then you can be a better manager.
yeah. And then fairly early in your experience managing, you ran into someone that wasn't doing their job. How did you handle that situation?
At that point, actually, that was pretty unique in IBM because back in the mid-'70s, firing somebody was a long process.
Right.
And IBM spent a lot of time making sure you documented stuff and so on. But that was my first experience where the person tried really hard but couldn't get the job done. I helped him a lot. But then ultimately he was just not doing the job, and it didn't seem fair to the rest of the team to have him on the team. And so I worked with my manager and exited him from the business. I mean, nicely, but.
It's almost easier when they're nasty, and it's hard when they're really trying.
That's very true.
To do the job, yeah.
But they're better off at the end of this because they're better off knowing that they're not in the right. It's not the right fit for them, and the team is better off because they're not there. I mean, so it is harder.
Yeah. After several promotions, you then moved to New York to be an executive assistant, and that's sort of an unusual kind of situation. How did that come about?
IBM maintains this, high potential list. I mean, they track people and so on.
And
So
you were on
I
it.
guess I was on that list, and our division president, the opportunity came up. I mean, they changed them about once a year to give somebody an opportunity to get the exposure at the executive level. So I just happened to get that opportunity after about 5 years of being a manager.
Were you excited about it?
I think so. I think I was, and I think certainly not very many people get to do that, and it was part of my formative, leadership style. I think came from that experience.
Yeah. Were you surprised to find out that you were considered one of these fast-track employees, or did you know that?
Not fully surprised. I mean, I knew that was an opportunity, but I didn't particularly lobby for it. I mean, it just happened. But no, I wasn't fully surprised, but I thought I could do it.
And soon after you started, your boss said to you, just because you carry God's bags doesn't mean you're God. What did he mean by that?
It was the first thing he told me when I sat down in his office in Somers. Basically reminding me that, that opportunity I have with him, I haven't really, there's a set of authority that I would get by working for him that I hadn't really earned it yet. And I was acting on his behalf, and that I'd have to remember that I was acting on his behalf and to use it wisely, and to I still had a lot of work to do to earn my keep.
Yeah. What kind of projects did you do through that year?
A lot of those were actually just shadowing my vice president at that time of the workstation division, Nick D'Onofrio. He was. I just prepared a lot of presentations for him, followed up on activities with other members of the division, got exposure to a lot of personnel topics, dealing with, maybe firing other people or reorganizing the division. So you got to see a lot of how they thought at that level, and you were privy to a lot of the conversations at that level, strategy and so on.
So what was different about those kinds of discussions? I mean, it's one thing that they're talking about a broader base of people, but what was
So
different?
I wasn't part of a 1,000-person division. When you're an engineer in 1,000-person, you just don't get to see the thinking behind, what's driving the business, how are decisions made, what are the factors behind it, how do you pick the people to run the team. So you pick that up by being around these guys.
So now you're spending more of your time with executives than you are with just regular employees. How do you behave differently around those execs? And what's the code of conduct?
Respect and openness and honesty. But I don't necessarily treat the execs any differently than I do anybody else. But once you get to that level, they have a certain set of skills and you depend on that, and you respect that. And it's mainly just about respect. There's no really difference between how you treat an exec and how you treat anybody else. But their level of experience and knowledge is higher, and you work with that.
Did you find yourself being more careful?
Probably in IBM, yes. But I think once I left there, and especially at Cobalt, where I am now, it's a much different environment culturally. And so we have a pretty open environment, so I don't have to be, I don't have to think about, what I'm saying a whole lot.
Right.
Which is nice.
Was that a nice change from management responsibilities? It was very different, being an executive assistant.
It was very different. It was, I think that the difficulty was now being, at a level that now people are, you're not part of the peer group anymore. Now you're at this level, and it's a bit tricky dealing with the rest of your community now. Because you know more about what's happening.
Right.
They're not quite sure why you are in a meeting with them, and so they're a little more careful than before. So you do have to handle yourself carefully.
But then your year ended. You had to go back to Texas from living in New York, and you were leading a large team. What teams was that? What were they responsible for?
Yeah, this was the graphics, hardware, and software development. So I came back from New York, and I was thrown into. Literally, I went from managing 10 people to managing close to 200 people. Again, you don't, it's hard to be taught how you do that.
Right.
And so I had multiple levels of management below me, and I had to learn how to deal with that. You're not managing, an engineer directly now. You've got second-line managers and first-line managers.
So what do you have to do differently?
Heck if I know. Let me see. I think it's learning to work through others. I mean, so you initial tendency is to want to do it yourself, and now you got to work through others and their styles and their capabilities, and know when to work with them and correct their behavior as opposed to trying to fix the root problem yourself. And again, that just comes through just doing it and making mistakes.
Yeah. And I guess after having a year where you weren't delegating per se, you were doing things on your own, that must have been an even bigger transition because you were away from management and then kind of coming back to it.
It was a difficult transition. Being thrown into a job managing 200 people is just not easy. And I think part of my problem was I was a little carried away by my position now. And,
Little ego.
Yeah, definitely. I did have that problem. It took me a couple of years probably to learn that, that got in the way. It definitely got in the way, and I think you have to be careful.
You said that good judgment comes by experience, and experience comes from bad judgment. What do you mean by that?
So a lot of my leadership training, in fact, I would attribute to those 3-4 years following my return from New York. And so you learn about so you learn from making poor decisions. And so the decisions I make now are, at least the good ones that I make now, are the benefit of having made those in the past. And some decisions you just can't, you don't learn it. I mean, you just have to be, experience it and go through it and make the errors as you go and fix it.
When you started your career, you said that you were kind of a shy kid. You didn't want to make waves. You just wanted to do what you were told. But then you started to get opinions and develop a sense of yourself and what you believed in. And then after a few years, it sounded like you got into a strong disagreement with one of your managers. How did you work your way through that?
Well, first thing, I expressed my opinions openly. The way I worked myself out of that is I actually left the team. Because at some point, you and your manager, and he was my manager at that time, and he was a division vice president, you have to be philosophically in the same orbit. It's a thing I believe in strongly. And if you're not in, you don't have to be in the same point in the orbit, you have to be in the same orbit. And if you're not in the same orbit, it's really difficult to have a a trusting relationship. And so I disagreed with him, and he was angry that I did, and so I left the team. And I started a different group.
Would you have handled that differently, given the experience you have now, looking back on that? Is there a different way you should have handled it, or do you think you did just fine under the circumstances?
Looking back, I still think I was right. In fact, I was right about the decision that I wanted to make. And so I'm not sure I could have done anything different, because he wasn't willing to listen to my point of view sufficiently at that time. But I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing.
No.
At that point, it's his decision versus mine, and he wants to go a certain way, and that's okay. I mean, you move on.
Such strong disagreements can often be a career-ending decision, but in this case, you got your own team to start. Do you think a lot of that had to do with your contacts back in New York?
I think that helped, because, there was more exposure to me personally, and I knew about others. But on the other hand, this disagreement was not one of politics. It was one of position, and so I still think I was competent. I was doing the right things, and so I was able to pick up this other opportunity and build a team.
What was starting a team from scratch like within that environment?
I think the first thing is you have to get over the I'm not managing 200 people thing. So I'm now an individual, and I've got a mission to build a team. So it does take a while to get over that, and then you start to hire people. You find people that you respect and can work with you, and that was actually a pretty exciting part of my career, is to build back a team of about 45 people, starting from scratch. It wasn't a team that I got, as compared to my previous job at that time. So that was pretty exciting to mold a team that you handpicked all of these people, and it's a different experience.
Were you able to bring in a lot of people that you knew previously and you'd worked with previously, or were they mostly new people?
And the one person in particular, that works for me now at Cobalt, Ron Harder, he worked for me there, and there was a few other core people that you have a kind of a close relationship with, and then you build up on that.
And what was this team responsible for?
We were actually doing software to emulate, to run Intel software on a RISC processor. So we're doing software emulation technologies.
And then you went back to India and worked there for several years. What brought that about?
One of my friends had gone to India with IBM to start a software division in India, and I was actually his customer for a few projects, and then the opportunity for an international assignment came up to grow a team over there. And the opportunity was in Bangalore, where my wife's family is from. I'd gone to school there before, never worked in India. So it just seemed like a wonderful opportunity, so just jumped on it.
What was different about working for IBM in India versus working for IBM in the United States?
I think the people are different. The relationship to management and leadership is a little different. I'd never worked there, so it was really a new experience for me. And I had to learn to deal with, they're more conscious of hierarchy, more respectful of hierarchy than here. So it's both good and the bad thing.
Well, we don't have respect for anything here, so.
So I had to learn to deal with that, and they were uncomfortable with too familiar an approach. So I had to, if you were too friendly, then they were not sure, because they're not used to that. And if you weren't, it was okay. So, I had to learn to change my behavior somewhat, but I didn't change it a whole lot, because I was trying to create a slightly different culture in my team.
And overall, was that a good experience for you and for your family?
It was excellent. My kids, I uprooted them and I moved them to India, and initially they didn't really want to do that.
How old were they at the time?
Let's see. Oh, you're making me calculate now.
Well, you're the mathematician.
I think you're, 95. So my daughter would have been about 11 or 12, and my son was about 8. So it was a difficult transition.
Yeah.
Right in middle school, The school system is very different. The teaching methods are different. You know, so making that transition was quite initially difficult for the kids, but we had a really strong support system. You know, their grandparents were there, and
Right.
we had a good life. They got to travel a lot.
Yeah. And got to probably learn a lot more about their roots than they would have.
Oh, absolutely.
Otherwise.
I mean, they'd always visited and never actually lived there. And now they actually got to live and see how, the rest of the people live and work, and understand some of the disparities between them and others and how to deal with that. I mean, a good example is going out for dinner. Typically, in a 4-star restaurant, you'd spend in a dinner for 4 of us as much as we had a driver, as much as our driver would make in a month.
Yeah.
And I think understanding that gave them a lot of perspective about, value of life and things and so on.
Yet at the end of that project, you decided to leave IBM. Why did you make that decision?
I felt I was, too far away from being able to make a direct impact on the company. So while, it's just, IBM is just big, and I never intended to or expected to leave IBM. I still probably bleed blue a little bit. But, it's just one of those things that, mostly to irritate people, I tell them that everything is predestined. And I think, some of it is, and it was just time. It was time to go do something else. And another friend of mine had moved to Perot Systems, and I just thought it was time to take that step.
You said that you realized in retrospect that you were leaving something rather than going towards something. Can you explain what you meant by that?
Yeah, I didn't know what I was getting myself into, so I was leaving IBM because I wasn't getting the satisfaction of the role that I was in at that time, and didn't see, my path forward in there. So I guess I left because I was leaving IBM, not because I was going to Perot Systems. So that's what I meant by that. It wasn't something that was necessarily pulling me, I guess I was pushing myself out.
Yeah. And it didn't work out very well, did it?
It was a 1-year experience in England that the job itself was not the best job. So it was just something I did. In the end of 1 year, I said, I got to do something else. And thank God I did, because that's why I'm here now.
Yeah. How did you and the Cobalt Group find each other?
I was groveling on the streets of Seattle, and I was actually just surfing on the web, looking around, and the search results showed up Cobalt, and I can't really say why it did. I looked there.
It was predestined.
It was predestined. I looked there, and Cobalt at that time used to have on their webpage photographs of all the salespeople, including the 2 founders of the company, John Holt and Jeff Barker. I looked at their pictures and I said, okay, this looks interesting. I sent both of them a note on a Thursday. Jeff Barker replied to me on Friday, and I flew down on Sunday and I interviewed on Monday. Then I came to work, a couple of weeks after that.
Pace is a little different from the pace at IBM, isn't it?
It was different. It was different, but I was ready for a change.
And can you tell us what the Cobalt Group does and what your role is?
We're the leading provider of e-business services to the automotive market. So we have a range of customers from manufacturers, Chrysler, Daimler Chrysler, Toyota, Honda, Lexus, about 13, 14 of them, and about 9,000 to 10,000 dealers who are our customers. And we provide a range of services so that they can conduct their business on the web. So we give them the tools and the training and the capabilities to do that on the web. My role is, today, is the Chief Technology Officer, which is to deliver. Basically, I'm responsible for all the technology deliverables for the company. The strategy, the products, the professional services, and the whole information technology infrastructure.
And why was this the right job for you at this point in your career?
It was a company that needed molding. It was an opportunity for me to apply, my years of learning and apply, you know, the benefits of my bad judgments, and apply that to a team that was average age 25, 26, had never really worked in a enterprise environment, very bright and capable, but a bit scattered. So it was just an opportunity to apply my learning and mold the team and make a difference at the company level that you could see.
When a seasoned professional comes into an entrepreneurial situation, they can either be completely welcomed because of their experience or they can be resented for it. How did it go at Cobalt?
Because they were concerned about you were at IBM 20 years, legacy, old school. Could you make a difference in a, you know, young and, you know, entrepreneurial internet company?
Or will you slow us down?
Or will you slow us down? Are you going to apply too much process? You know, can you move quick enough? You know, can you manage a long-haired, pierced guy? You know, and those were real questions that I know John Holt was worried about, and I think it took him 6 to 9 months before he said, "Okay, this might work."
Now, was he the long-haired, pierced guy?
No. This was my CEO. My CEO, well, he was concerned, and he actually, as part of hiring me, it's one of the questions he asked several of my people I referred. You know, says, can he do this or not? He wasn't convinced about 9 months after I joined.
And then you proved yourself. What have you done since starting at the company that you're particularly proud of?
Just about everything, I would say. This company's changed a lot in 3 years. You know, we've really grown the maturity level of the people of the company. We've scaled the capabilities of the team. We've created this industry and taken a leadership role in it, and you know, I think I had a role to play in that. And so just about everything I've done here has been a rewarding experience. Probably the 3 best years of my professional career, and I expect there'll be a lot more.
What are some of the next challenges you have coming up there?
Growth, and kind of being much bigger and more successful than we are now. And it's, you know, scaling in this environment is difficult, you know, with the market given what it is. But we're in a good position, and you know, we have a last man standing approach to this, and you know, we've done pretty well in the last year. And you know, I think just building on the success we have had so far, executing well, and just taking more control of this industry.
What do you think you've done right that a lot of other companies did wrong? Because a lot of the other companies aren't there anymore, said the last man standing.
Having a good vision that is consistent. So you know, ever since I've joined, you know, the basic vision hasn't changed. We have a very good business model, which says that we know how to generate revenue. We've got lots of customers. You know, they pay us every month. It's a good thing. And having that kind of as a constant, you know, as a beacon, then lets you focus on execution. And so I think we've been practical about our challenges and our ability to grow, and we're able to deal with change quickly. And because I think as an executive team, we are open to it, we listen to input, and we make the right decisions quickly. We make some of them wrong, but you know, overall the right ones outweigh the wrong ones.
How would you describe your management style, and how has that kind of changed over the years?
It's high expectations of people that work for and with me. Probably in some cases too high, and so one of those things I've had to learn is manage my expectation of others. It's probably very direct, and probably more direct in some cases than it should be. Again, and one of those other things I've changed is to try and match it to, the profile of the other person. Learning to do that better. But ultimately, I think it's about just being open and honest and direct, and trying to get as much out of the other person as possible.
Do you motivate people differently in an entrepreneurial environment than you did in a more traditional environment?
Not really. I mean, one of the I think one of the myths I think created over the last few years is this notion that, you know, if you're from an enterprise legacy background, that you can't make the contributions, you know, in an internet company, and it's just not true. Many companies, large companies, they're very, you know, entrepreneurial in groups, and they're just not necessarily able to do it, you know, as a whole company.
Right.
So, you know, a lot of the motivating factors and the ways you manage and the ways you, the way you guide people is not a whole lot different. It's not to say it is completely the same, but it is, the fundamental principles of motivating people aren't any different, whether you're in IBM or in Cobalt.
How do you handle particularly stressful situations?
Clinically, I guess.
What do you mean by that?
Which is to say, you know, one of my things I learned from Nick D'Onofrio when I was an executive assistant was, you know, in God we trust, all others bring data. So you know, we look at data and say, what does it say? What should we do? Try and, you know, I think I stay calm, so I don't get all worked up about a particular stressful situation. And sometimes I can be, on a personal level, too clinical, where I'm not dealing with the person's emotions, right? I'm talking about data and they're talking about how they feel. And that can drive them up the wall.
Yeah, people don't want to have to document their feelings. They don't enjoy that. Go send me an email.
But I think just compartmentalizing the problems and then working on it.
Do you intentionally not let people see you upset? Or is it just part of your personality?
No, I think that is one of the many leadership training things I have. There was I think either a Navy admiral or a general who said, you know, you can't let it show. So I think I do. I think it's important that people you lead, if you're in a stressful situation, if they see you all flustered, I mean, there's no way you're going to be able to calm them down. So yes, I do work on not letting it show.
Yeah. I think also if you tend to lash out at people, they're not going to give you the bad news. You know, if they know that you're going to say, okay, let's sit down and figure this out, as opposed to screaming at them, then they're going to be more inclined to not wait until the last minute to tell you that there's fire in the corner over there.
I've lost my temper 3 times in my professional career.
You can remember each of them?
Absolutely. And at the time I did, it felt really, really good. That, you know, I was pounding the desk and, you know, being very loud, but then you sit back and you reflect, and it's just not the right way to do it. But it really felt good for those few minutes.
Yeah, it's very cathartic.
But in general, yeah, I think you have to deal with it very calm. You can't yell at people, and you just have to manage them the right way. Doesn't mean you can't be firm.
Right, right. Why do you keep puzzles and toys on your desk?
Because I'm kind of a child at heart. I mean, I just love to play around with things. They're stimulating, I think. But mainly it's just because it's fun.
And one of the things that you've started doing at the Cobalt Group is, I think once a month your wife comes in and brings lunch for everybody.
Yeah,
And
she cooks an Indian meal for 20 people once a month, which has turned out to be quite popular.
How did that get started?
I have no idea. I can't remember. I think it was just a suggestion that was made, and I think she loves to cook. She loves to feed people. I love to eat, and so I think I must have started.
She was bringing in lunch for you, and everybody else wanted
and,
some.
I think it grew from there.
Okay. We'll be back to take questions from the audience right after this break.
It was a little intimidating at first, a sophomore working with so many PhDs. In the lab, I studied an infectious bacterium that is a major killer of people with HIV. I showed my data to Professor Cangelosi, and we realized I had made a new discovery.
Wow.
If this drug-resistant bacterium can be treated, people with HIV will have a better chance of surviving this infection. It's pretty overwhelming to think that I can have a part in helping millions of people.
The University of Washington Business School, located in Seattle, Washington, ranks among the top business schools in the United States. Information Technology Leaders is one of the many ways the UW Business School forges partnerships and reaches out beyond the university. For more information about the University of Washington Business School or Information Technology Leaders, visit informationtechnologyleaders.com.
I'm learning to care for prostate cancer patients at a UW teaching hospital. I study cancer cells from those same patients in the lab. Being able to study the disease, care for patients suffering from it, and research new ways to diagnose it helps me to see the whole cancer care picture. I'm researching a way to isolate a patient's cancer cells. Then we can determine how to treat them effectively and increase a patient's chances of survival. That would be so exciting.
As CTO, how hands-on do you get with the actual development of the product, or are you more in a management position? I mean, do you get inside the architecture situation, or are you just at a higher level? And secondly, what do you look for in potential employees? Do you look for what they know now or their potential as far as learning new technologies? What do you look for?
The first one is, and as CTO in general, I'm not writing code and I'm not doing detailed design. I do, however, spend time looking at the architecture, reviewing architectures, reviewing how we're, our technical strategy. And from a personal interest standpoint, I do every once in a while go further down and see how exactly people are doing their work, but that's more just to stay in touch with how people are doing their work. But most of my day-to-day work, it is at a higher level. It's the business level, strategy level, reviews, and so on. In terms of what do I look for, I think one of the key things about Cobalt culturally in particular, I think, is we're not trying to fill a position, a job. We're trying to bring in people that can grow and scale with the company. And our company's changed hugely, in the last 3 years, and I expect, we'll change, 80% in the next 2 to 3 years. So I think the important thing is you have to have some, basic competencies, obviously, and we look for, if it's computer science or if it's, financial analyst, we want you to be strong in that. But beyond that, we are looking for people that aren't limited by, the job that they're in. And 6 months from now, you may be in a different role. The company itself may have changed, and so we look to see if you have the initiative to want to grow and change with the company. A lot of the people that in the last 3 years, a lot of people are not in the company now because they actually haven't been able to grow and scale with the company. So I think key thing is to find that individual who can.
Thank you.
How has the company's corporate culture changed when converting from a publicly traded company to a privately held company?
Actually, it's very little change because the company was always run. There's no fundamental change in the way our investors are participating in the company now. I mean, they put in more money and they own the whole company now as opposed to 55% of the company. So the management style of our investors is pretty much unchanged. The only difference is now we don't have to do all the things that you have to do as a public company. You're not scrutinized on a daily basis, and you can really focus on developing your strategy without all the distraction of the public markets.
Okay, thanks.
I wanted to ask you if working for a company like IBM's, in their culture, if it's very structured like the military, and if they do a lot of training. And the second question was, what was your bachelor's degree in and from where?
Bachelor's degree is in electrical engineering from the University of Houston. So when I moved from India to the U.S., I transferred to the University of Houston and I finished my bachelor's in EE. IBM is structured like the military? No. Is it structured? Yes. Then there's a range of structure. Some divisions are probably more structured than others. They do provide a lot of training. A lot of my in particular, my management training, I have to attribute to all my years at IBM. because they do a really very focused job in giving you those skills. I mean, it's kind of boring when you go to those sessions and 20 years later you'll sit back and say, I understand why they did that. So I think they do provide more training opportunities and they're a little more structured, but so at a high level they are, but within groups, I mean, it varies all across the company. So you can't paint everybody with the same brush in there.
The University of Washington Business School, located in Seattle, Washington, ranks among the top business schools in the United States. Information Technology Leaders is one of the many ways the UW Business School forges partnerships and reaches out beyond the university. For more information about the University of Washington Business School or Information Technology Leaders, visit informationtechnologyleaders.com.
Salmon have to overcome incredible odds to survive. Sometimes people can help. I led a research project on flow rates in a local stream. Working with research assistants from psychology and English opened my eyes to the complex relationship between science and public policy. Now, when I work with school kids at the UW hatchery, I tell them the whole story of salmon, forests, streams, and human habitation. Future generations, salmon, and people will benefit from our research.
I'd like to close with some comments from the president and CEO of the Cobalt Group. When Rajan started here, our code and operations were like spaghetti. He wrapped it up, put rubber bands on it, and kept us running while a new improved system was being built off to the side. He's brought process and discipline and stability to our production management. As a people manager, he expects debate and honesty. He's not afraid to get in a room and hash it out, but he always shows respect for differing opinions. Rajan has become our Rock of Gibraltar here. I keep giving him more and more to do, and he never disappoints me.
Information Technology Leaders is sponsored by the Cobalt Group, an e-business company that develops software and services to help automotive manufacturers and dealers maximize their overall operating efficiencies and profits.
What I've always thought is that it gives kids a reason to be learning, and it structures the situation so that they're highly motivated and that they are then forced to seek learning. This is what John Dewey always talked about, is that you should be able to set up learning experiences in such a way that it opens doors for children, and they want to learn, and you create this situation that he always talked about as the felt need to learn. And when you have that, you've got them. Yeah. And that contextual teaching and learning does that.
Contextual teaching enables K-12 students to apply their academic knowledge and skills in a variety of settings in order to solve simulated or real-world problems. Contextual learning occurs when students apply what is being taught to their roles and responsibilities as family members, citizens, students, and workers. Contextual teaching and learning emphasizes higher-level thinking, knowledge transfer across academic disciplines, and collecting, analyzing, and synthesizing information from multiple sources and viewpoints. Let's take a look at contextual teaching and learning at the Environment and Adventure School.
You can sit in a classroom and listen to a speaker. If you're a kinesthetic learner, you're not going to take it in. You're not going to retain it. When you use all of your senses to learn something, it sticks with you. Out here, you can listen, you can see, you can do it. All those different types of learners are benefiting.
We've taken the children out of a classroom setting because everything I've covered today with forest ecology could be done somewhat in a classroom setting, but by making that connection with the students to the outside world, it's a much more powerful experience for the children, and they're experiencing what they're learning as well as just sitting passively for some parts of the day and listening to people. But everything that we talk about is brought alive for the students because we're out of doors.
We bring a net out and we split up into two groups. One group took one side of the net on the rope, and then another group took the other side, and we pulled up at the same time, coming up the beach, and there was mostly fish and crabs. And they put it into the buckets, and then we looked at them, and the professional showed us like what kind of fish there were and what live in the Puget Sound. But then we went back into the lab that he has, and he explained them in more detail. He showed us like what they eat and how they're camouflaged and what we might have not got out there.
Most students think of the ocean, they see fish. We're seeing the invertebrates, we're seeing the things under the waves that we don't normally see, but play a very important ecological role.
It's engaging all their senses. Instead of just sitting still and sucking it in and spitting it out, they're out there handling things and moving things around and getting involved with each other on a totally different level and learning things with all their senses.
This is tied directly to academic learning. We've prepped them on some of the content. It's tying together, it's bringing together various diverse content in an integrative sense out in the field. It's letting them see and apply their learnings. We're asking them to do thinking, they're journaling. They have set questions for each of their field experiences. They have to do some real deep reflection and demonstrate that they've had learning before we can pass them on.
A lot of our outdoor have done math, we've done mapping, we've done all these different things, and we go into the classroom and then we incorporate what we learned outside in the classroom, and I think it really, really, really helps.
I'm also a parent of one of the students at this school, so I'm kind of in two camps, as a parent volunteer and also as a naturalist and as an educator. And certainly for me, I can see the value for my son in this kind of setting because he likes to be academically challenged. He has really excelled and he is showing enthusiasm in subjects. Writing was always a chore for him, and his writing has come alive this year because of his experiences and because we've been able to draw on the experiences that we've had.
It's been an exciting thing to be a part of it. To see it happening, and I think for the adults that have been involved, we've all said, gosh, we wish we could have had educational experiences like this.
The Washington State Consortium for Contextual Teaching and Learning is one of 7 national demonstration projects. It is comprised of partners from 11 colleges and universities, 20 school districts, and community-based agencies from across the state. The Washington State Consortium has 3 distinct features: a statewide network of community-based agencies, K-12 schools and universities, a focus on addressing contextual teaching and learning strategies and activities to specific academic performance standards, a regional collaboration between university professors and K-12 teachers in preparing new teachers for contextual teaching and learning. The consortium is helping to empower teachers to implement and adopt contextual teaching and learning strategies. Through the demonstration of exemplary contextual teaching and learning projects, through activities across the state by Academy Fellows, and by disseminating these practices and plans in neighboring states. The consortium is housed at the Center for the Study and Teaching of At-Risk Students with the University of Washington's College of Education. For more information, visit our website at www.wacontextual.org.